"He'll come back," Lucas said, and for the first time in his life, Ethan Caldwell was terrified that his brother was wrong. The palace had never been truly quiet before. Even at 4 in the morning, there were guards changing shifts, servants moving through distant halls, clocks ticking behind carved oak doors. But now Ethan could hear only one thing: the absence of Noah Bennett. His scent was gone. Not faded. Gone. The soft trace of vanilla and winter pear that had lingered in these halls for years had vanished as completely as if Noah had never lived there at all. Ethan stood outside the Omega's bedroom, one hand frozen on the silver handle. Something inside him already knew. Lucas arrived first, his usual confidence replaced by an expression Ethan had never seen before. Mason came seconds later, barefoot, his dark hair disheveled, his face pale. "Open it," Mason whispered. Ethan did. The room was immaculate. The curtains were drawn. The bed had been made. Noah's favorite sweater was missing from the chair by the window. So were the worn brown boots he always chose over the expensive shoes the royal tailor kept ordering for him. Lucas crossed the room quickly. "Noah." Nothing answered him. Mason stopped beside the bed. His eyes lowered. There, resting carefully on the white coverlet, was the silver engagement collar Noah had worn for nearly 4 years. Beside it sat a folded piece of paper. Ethan picked it up. 5 words. That was all Noah had left them. "I waited long enough." Lucas laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "He's angry." "Fine. He went somewhere to cool off." Ethan looked at the empty wardrobe. With half his clothes, the laughter died. Within 20 minutes, every gate in the capital was being checked. By sunrise, messengers had been sent to every royal residence within 50 miles. By noon, Ethan had contacted every official who might have seen Noah's name on a travel document. Nothing. No carriage. No train ticket. No hotel reservation. No scent trail strong enough for even the palace's best trackers to follow. Noah had not simply walked away. He had erased himself. Lucas paced the council room, insisting they were overlooking something. Mason said almost nothing. Ethan kept staring at the clock. For years, Noah had waited for them beneath that clock. Dinners postponed. Promises rescheduled. Celebrations missed. There had always been another meeting, another ceremony, another crisis that seemed more urgent because Noah never complained. Noah understood. Noah forgave. Noah waited. Until he didn't. Near sunset, the elderly palace steward appeared at the council chamber door, twisting his hands nervously. Ethan stood. "You know something?" The man hesitated. "Your Majesties, Master Noah did not decide to leave last night." Lucas went still. Mason finally looked up. The steward swallowed. "He's been preparing to leave you for months." 48 hours earlier, Noah Bennett had been standing in the palace kitchen arguing with a pie. "You are supposed to look elegant," he informed the crooked blueberry crust, as if disappointment alone might improve it. The cook covered a smile. Noah noticed and pointed a flour-covered finger at her. "Not a word, Margaret. 3 kings run this country, and somehow I am still losing a political battle against pastry." She laughed anyway. Noah did too, and for a moment he looked exactly as everyone expected him to look. Warm, bright, endlessly patient. That was the version of Noah the palace knew. The Omega who remembered every servant's birthday. The man who left coffee outside Ethan's office during late council sessions, who listened to Lucas tell the same ridiculous stories twice, who stayed awake whenever Mason returned from distant provinces because Mason hated entering a dark palace alone. Noah remembered everything about them. Ethan took his coffee black afternoon. Lucas pretended to hate cinnamon, but stole Noah's cinnamon rolls whenever he thought nobody noticed. Mason could not sleep during thunderstorms. They were small facts. Private facts. The kind that made love feel less like destiny and more like attention. Noah had once believed they noticed him the same way. He had stopped believing that quietly. There had been no dramatic moment, only a collection of empty chairs. His birthday dinner the previous spring had been set for 4. Ethan sent apologies at 7:30. Lucas sent flowers at 8. Mason returned after midnight and found Noah asleep beside a cake with 3 untouched slices. Noah had smiled the next morning and said, "Next time." On the anniversary of his arrival at the palace, he waited beside the West Garden fountain for nearly 2 hours before learning the brothers had been called to an emergency meeting. "Next time?" Noah had whispered again. During a difficult week when his Omega instincts left him exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed, he had requested only one evening of company. Ethan assumed Lucas would stay. Lucas assumed Mason had already promised. Mason assumed Ethan had changed his schedule. Noah spent that evening alone with tea gone cold beside him. No one had meant to abandon him. Somehow, that made it worse. Cruelty could be confronted. Neglect wrapped itself in excuses. By the time Noah finished the pie, Margaret was watching him carefully. "Are they coming tonight?" she asked. Noah glanced toward the 3-place settings he had requested for the private dining room. "They promised." His answer came too quickly. Margaret said nothing. Noah brushed flour from his sleeves and looked toward the palace clock. He had prepared 3 gifts for the royal banquet that evening, one for each brother, small things chosen with embarrassing care. He told himself this night would be different. He told himself they had been busy. He told himself kings carried responsibilities ordinary people could never understand. Then he smiled at Margaret, softer this time. "Next time," he began, but the words stopped halfway out. Something inside him had finally grown tired of hearing them. By 7 that evening, the grand ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, filled with music, polished marble, and the quiet competition of nobles pretending not to watch one another. Noah stood near a tall window overlooking the palace gardens, one hand resting over the 3 small boxes hidden inside his coat. Ethan had received a fountain pen engraved with the coordinates of the village where the brothers had first met Noah. Lucas had a silver compass because he was forever getting lost and refusing to admit it. Mason had a tiny carved wooden lighthouse, a reminder of the coastal home he once confessed he dreamed of visiting when royal duties finally slowed down. Noah had spent weeks choosing them. He had imagined their expressions. He had imagined dinner afterward, just the 4 of them, without advisors or ambassadors or urgent documents appearing between every sentence. He should have known better. Ethan was surrounded by ministers before the first course. Lucas disappeared into a circle of foreign delegates. Mason was pulled aside by a military advisor. Noah waited. 20 minutes became 40. 40 became an hour. The music changed twice. Eventually, Noah went looking for them, still carrying the gifts. He found their voices before he found the room. The brothers were speaking with several nobles inside a private lounge near the East Gallery. Noah slowed when he heard his own name. "You 3 are either very confident or very foolish," Lord Harrington said with an amused laugh. "You leave your Omega alone at every important event. One day, he may decide someone else appreciates his company." Lucas laughed. It was easy, careless, familiar. "Noah? He will wait for us." The words were followed by another laugh from someone in the room. Ethan said nothing. Mason said nothing. Noah stood behind the half-open door, perfectly still. 5 simple words. That was all. 5 words should not have been enough to break something that had lasted for years. But it was not the sentence itself. It was the certainty behind it. They believed his patience was permanent. They believed his love required nothing in return. They believed Noah would always be exactly where they left him. His fingers tightened around the 3 boxes. For one terrible second, he wanted one of them to disagree. Ethan could have said Lucas was wrong. Mason could have defended him. Anyone could have remembered that waiting was not the same as being happy. No one did. Noah stepped backward before anyone saw him. He returned to the ballroom, placed the unopened gifts beneath an arrangement of white lilies, and walked past Margaret without touching the blueberry pie she had saved for him. "Leaving early?" she asked. Noah paused. Usually, he would have smiled. Usually, he would have invented an excuse for them. Tonight, he simply said, "Yes." He reached his room just before midnight. There were no tears. That surprised him. He removed the silver engagement collar and placed it carefully on the bed. Then he opened the suitcase hidden behind the false panel in his wardrobe. Clothes, cash, travel papers under a different name. Everything had been ready for months, prepared during all those lonely evenings when part of him had apparently known what the rest refused to accept. Noah looked around the room one last time. Then he wrote 5 words on a piece of paper, folded it once, and placed it beside the collar. Before dawn reached the palace windows, Noah Bennett was gone. For the first 24 hours, Lucas treated Noah's disappearance like an argument he fully expected to win. "He needs space," he said, standing in the council chamber while reports from every city gate were placed before them. "He will calm down." Ethan wanted to believe him. Mason did not answer. By the 3rd day, Lucas had stopped saying it. By the 7th, no one in the palace spoke Noah's name casually anymore. His absence had changed the building in ways none of them had expected. Ethan reached for coffee every morning and found the small table outside his office empty. Lucas walked into the library twice with a story already forming on his lips before remembering the person who always laughed at the ending was gone. Mason returned from a late inspection one rainy night and stood beneath the front archway for nearly a minute, staring at the place where Noah used to wait with a blanket and a tired smile. The palace had hundreds of rooms, dozens of servants, and 3 kings powerful enough to command almost anything. Somehow, it felt empty because one Omega was missing. On the 14th day, Ethan ordered every record connected to Noah's life in the palace brought into the private council room. Schedules, medical appointments, correspondence, household requests. He approached the problem like a king because being a king was the only thing he understood. Facts could be organized. Mistakes could be corrected. People could be found. Then he opened a file from the previous winter. Noah had requested companionship during a difficult week when his Omega instincts had left him exhausted and anxious. Ethan remembered seeing the request. He had assumed Lucas was handling it. Across the table, Lucas went pale. I thought Mason stayed with him. Mason slowly shook his head. I thought Ethan changed his schedule. Silence filled the room. Ethan turned another page. Noah's birthday. No attendance from any of them. The garden anniversary. Cancelled. A private dinner. Postponed. Another dinner. Postponed again. Page after page, the same pattern appeared. 3 men loving Noah in theory. 3 men assuming someone else was loving him in practice. Lucas sat down heavily. No. His voice was barely audible. There must have been someone with him. Ethan looked at the records. There was not. Mason closed his eyes. That realization was worse than Noah leaving. They had not abandoned him once. They had abandoned him in pieces, so gradually that none of them had noticed. Ethan remembered every time Noah smiled and said he understood. Lucas remembered every joke he made about Noah being patient. Mason remembered every moment he almost asked if Noah was all right, then decided there would be time later. Later. The word felt poisonous now. Ethan pushed away from the table and walked to the window. Below, the West Garden fountain stood silent beneath the gray sky. We thought he would always be here, Mason said. Lucas stared at the untouched chair beside him, the one Noah used during private meetings. He was. Ethan looked down at the growing stack of missed moments. Then he finally understood the truth they should have seen years ago. Noah had not disappeared from their lives in one night. They had been losing him for a very long time. By the 3rd week, Ethan stopped searching for Noah as if he were a missing member of the royal household and started searching for him as if he were a stranger. That was when the truth became unbearable. Noah Bennett had withdrawn from the Royal Protection Registry 6 months earlier. He had opened a private bank account under his own name, transferred small amounts into it over time, and quietly requested copies of every legal document connected to his engagement. None of the brothers had noticed. The final surprise was buried in an old section of kingdom law that had not been used in nearly 80 years. An Omega bound to the crown could dissolve an engagement without royal approval if he could prove prolonged emotional abandonment. Ethan read the document twice. Lucas refused to read it at all. Mason simply stared at Noah's signature at the bottom. The petition had been approved 3 days before the banquet. Noah had already been free when Lucas made that careless joke. He had not needed permission to leave. He had only been waiting for one final reason to believe staying was worth it. We gave him the opposite, Mason said quietly. Their search widened beyond official records. For the first time, they began asking ordinary people about Noah. A bookseller remembered him immediately. Quiet young man. Always bought travel journals about the coast. A painter near the Eastern Market smiled when shown his portrait. He used to sketch here on Sunday mornings. Pretty talented, too. Lucas blinked. Noah painted? The woman looked confused. You did not know? For words. Somehow, they hurt more than accusation. At a small flower shop, the owner remembered Noah buying white daisies every month. Ethan had always assumed Noah loved roses because the palace gardens were filled with them. Roses? The florist said. He hated roses. Said they looked too perfect to trust. Lucas almost laughed. Almost. Later, they found a receipt tucked inside an old travel book Noah had left behind. It was from a tiny coastal town called Belhaven, nearly 300 miles away. Attached was a handwritten note from a real estate agent thanking Noah for asking about storefront rentals. Mason read it first. He wanted to shop. Ethan looked at the faded picture printed on the receipt. A narrow building with blue shutters stood across from the ocean. Upstairs, a small apartment faced the water. Downstairs, sunlight-filled shelves that could have held books. It was simple, unremarkable, completely unlike the palace. Lucas sat back slowly. I knew how he took his tea, he said. I knew the songs he hummed when he was nervous. I knew he loved us. His voice weakened. But I did not know what he wanted his life to look like. No one answered. That night, Ethan spread everything they had learned across the council table. Sketches, receipts, travel brochures, legal papers, pieces of a man who had lived beside them for 4 years while remaining almost invisible. Then Mason found one final document hidden inside the folder from the Royal Archives. It was not about a bookstore. It was not about the coast. It was a sealed report Noah had personally filed concerning suspicious activity inside the palace. Ethan broke the seal. As he read the first page, his face changed. Noah had not been planning only to leave them. For months, he had been trying to protect them from something none of the 3 kings had even known was there. The report was dated 7 months earlier, and by the time Ethan reached the final page, the room felt colder than winter. Noah had discovered irregular payments moving through accounts connected to several senior nobles, men who publicly supported the crown while privately funding a campaign designed to fracture the bond between the 3 kings. The plan was disturbingly simple. They did not intend to challenge Ethan, Lucas, and Mason directly. They intended to use Noah. Anonymous letters had been sent to him. Invitations from unfamiliar estates had arrived without explanation. Gifts appeared at the palace gates carrying scents meant to confuse royal trackers. Each incident looked harmless alone. Together, they formed a pattern. Someone had been studying Noah, learning his routines, waiting for an opportunity to turn the king's Omega into political leverage. Why did he never tell us? Lucas asked. Ethan kept reading. Then he found the answer in Noah's own handwriting. I attempted to request a private meeting with their majesties on 3 occasions. Each meeting was postponed due to matters of state. Mason lowered his head. Ethan remembered those requests now. One had arrived during negotiations with the northern provinces, another during a trade dispute. The third had been placed on his desk the morning of Noah's birthday. Ethan had written reschedule in the margin. He had never asked why the meeting mattered. Noah had stopped asking. Instead, he began investigating alone. He copied financial records. He tracked names. He collected letters. He even identified the noble responsible for coordinating the scheme, Lord Harrington, the same man who had stood in the private lounge and joked about Noah eventually leaving. Lucas went completely still when he recognized the name. He knew, Mason said. That night, Harrington was testing us. The realization settled over them slowly. Harrington had wanted to know whether Noah mattered enough for the kings to notice his unhappiness. Lucas remembered his own laughter and closed his eyes. He had given the man an answer, but Noah had already been ahead of them. According to the final pages, he had transferred copies of the evidence to 3 separate legal offices outside the capital. He had arranged for the documents to be released if anything happened to him. Then he had removed himself from royal protection, changed his travel identity, and disappeared before anyone could use him as a pressure point against the crown. Ethan stared at the signature at the bottom of the report. Noah Bennett. Steady. Precise. Alone. He left because of us, Lucas whispered. Not only because of us, Ethan said. That was somehow worse. Noah had been exhausted. Lonely. Planning a future without them. Yet even while preparing to walk away, he had still been protecting the 3 men who had repeatedly failed to protect his heart. Mason crossed the room and stopped beside the window. Beyond the glass, the palace grounds stretched toward the dark horizon. Belhaven, he said. Ethan looked up. Mason held the old receipt from the coastal town. If he wanted a place where nobody knew him, he would choose somewhere connected to the life he actually wanted. Lucas stood immediately. For the first time in weeks, hope appeared on his face, fragile and dangerous. Ethan gathered the report, but his attention remained on one detail circled in Noah's handwriting. A property office in Belhaven, 300 miles away. A blue-shuttered building facing the ocean. By sunrise, the kings were no longer sending others to search for Noah. They were going themselves. They reached Belhaven just after sunrise, when the ocean was still silver beneath a pale sky, and the streets smelled faintly of salt, coffee, and fresh bread. For 3 men raised in marble halls, the town felt almost impossibly ordinary. Small houses leaned toward the harbor. Shopkeepers unlocked painted doors. Gulls argued over the boardwalk. Then Lucas stopped walking. Across the street stood a narrow building with blue shutters. Books filled the front windows. A hand-painted sign above the door read "Hail Books and Paper." Through the glass, Noah was laughing. Not politely. Not because someone expected him to. Really laughing. His head tipped back, his eyes bright as an elderly customer handed him a crooked stack of novels. Ethan forgot how to breathe. Mason did not move at all. Lucas whispered, "He looks happy." The words held no relief. Only grief. Because Noah did look happy, and for the first time, they had to face the possibility that happiness had begun after he left them. The bell above the door chimed when Ethan entered. Noah looked up automatically. The smile vanished. Silence came so quickly it felt physical. His scent flickered in the air, carefully muted but unmistakable now that they were close. Lucas took 1 step forward. Noah stepped back. Lucas stopped immediately. That tiny movement wounded him more than anger could have. Noah looked at each brother in turn. Ethan, rigid and pale. Lucas, stripped of every easy joke. Mason, standing near the door like he was afraid entering further would be an intrusion. Noah lowered his eyes. "Your Majesties." Lucas flinched. For years of shared breakfasts, private jokes, winter evenings, and quiet promises had been reduced to 2 formal words. "Please do not call us that," he said. Noah's expression did not change. "What would you prefer?" No one had an answer. Ethan finally placed a sealed folder on the counter. "We found your report." Noah went still. "Then you know." "We know enough to understand how badly we failed you," Ethan said. Noah gave a small, tired smile. "That is not the same as understanding me." Mason stepped forward, then stopped several feet away. "You are right." Noah looked surprised. Mason continued softly. "We came here thinking we needed to bring you home. Somewhere along the way, I realized we never asked whether the palace still felt like home to you." The bookstore seemed to grow quieter. Outside, waves rolled against the shore. Lucas stared at the shelves, the blue curtains, the small coffee mug beside the register. Pieces of Noah. Everywhere. "Did you really want this?" he asked. Noah followed his gaze. "A bookstore by the ocean?" Lucas nodded. "For years." Lucas closed his eyes briefly. "I never knew." "I know." The answer was gentle. That made it worse. Ethan pushed the folder toward Noah. "Lord Harrington has been removed from his position while the council reviews the evidence. The people connected to him are being investigated. You are safe here." Noah looked at the folder but did not touch it. "And now?" Ethan swallowed. The king who could command an entire nation suddenly seemed unsure how to speak to one man. "Now we apologize." Noah waited. And then Lucas looked at him, hope and fear fighting across his face. Noah folded his hands on the counter. "Then you leave." Mason lowered his gaze. Ethan nodded once. No argument. No royal order. No claim. They turned toward the door. Just before Mason stepped outside, Noah spoke again. "Thank you for coming yourselves." All 3 brothers stopped. It was not forgiveness. It was barely even warmth. But for the first time since they had found him, it was something that belonged to Noah freely. And this time, none of them tried to take more. The 3 brothers left Belhaven before sunset, and Noah watched from the bookstore window until their car disappeared beyond the curve of the coastal road. He expected relief. Instead, he felt something quieter and more complicated. They had listened. For once, they had accepted his answer without trying to change it. 3 days later, a courier arrived carrying a single envelope. Inside was the official dissolution of Noah's royal engagement, signed by Ethan, Lucas, and Mason. No conditions. No requests. No hidden promise that he would reconsider. Beneath the documents lay the silver collar Noah had left behind. A small note rested beside it. "We are returning this because it belongs to you, not to us." Noah read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Weeks passed. The investigation into Lord Harrington's network continued without Noah being summoned back to the capital. Ethan sent legal updates through Noah's attorney instead of contacting him directly. Lucas stopped sending flowers after learning Noah hated roses. Mason sent nothing at all, which somehow told Noah more than any gift could have. They were giving him space. Real space. Not the kind they once assumed he would patiently endure, but the kind that required them to accept they might never be invited back into his life. One afternoon, Noah received another envelope. This one contained a copy of a new royal decree. The kingdom's laws governing Omega partnerships had been changed. No Omega connected to the crown could be required to remain in an engagement without independent legal representation. Royal protection could no longer be used to restrict travel. Emotional neglect would be recognized as legitimate grounds for dissolution without approval from an alpha partner. Noah stared at the pages for a long time. At the bottom was Ethan's signature, then Lucas's, then Mason's. There was no personal message. They had not changed the law to impress him. They had changed it because they had finally understood what power looked like from the other side. Months later, Noah returned to the capital for one day to give a formal statement regarding Harrington's investigation. When the hearing ended, he found the brothers waiting in a quiet corridor. They looked different somehow. Not less royal. Less certain. Ethan held the final dissolution certificate. Lucas carried the silver collar in a plain wooden box. Mason stood with his hands at his sides, making no attempt to step closer. Ethan offered Noah the certificate. "It is complete." Noah accepted it. "Thank you." Lucas opened the box. "This is yours." Noah touched the silver briefly, then closed the lid. "I do not know if I want it anymore." Lucas nodded. "Then you do not have to." Noah studied their faces. "You are not asking me to return?" Ethan's expression tightened, but his voice remained steady. "No." The answer surprised Noah enough that he forgot to breathe for a second. Mason spoke next. "We wanted you back because we missed you. Then we realized missing you did not give us the right to decide where you belonged." Ethan looked directly at Noah. "A place where you spent your life waiting for us was never a home we deserved to call yours." Noah felt something inside him shift. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first fragile movement toward it. Lucas stepped back, leaving the corridor open. "Belhaven is 300 miles away," he said with a faint, sad smile. "We know the road now." Noah almost smiled. Almost. Then he walked past them. None of the brothers followed. And as Noah left the palace on his own terms, he understood the difference at last. They were no longer asking him to wait. They were learning how to. Winter reached Belhaven quietly. By the first snowfall, Noah had stopped measuring time by how long he had been gone. The bookstore was doing well. Children came after school for stories. Fishermen left novels on the counter and returned weeks later arguing about the endings. Noah learned the names of his neighbors, found a favorite table at the cafe across the street, and discovered that the ocean sounded different every morning. He built a life that belonged entirely to him. And still, sometimes, 3 familiar faces appeared in his thoughts. Ethan sent official reports only when necessary. Lucas mailed one birthday card with nothing inside except, "I remembered." Mason wrote a single letter describing the first thunderstorm of summer and admitting the palace had felt strange without Noah making tea. None of them asked him to return. None appeared unexpectedly at his door. They waited. Months passed before Noah finally understood what that waiting meant. It was not confidence that he would eventually surrender. It was acceptance that he might never choose them again. That realization frightened him more than he expected, because somewhere between anger and freedom, he had begun missing them too. Not the kings. The men beneath the crowns. Ethan pretending not to enjoy terrible jokes. Lucas stealing cinnamon rolls. Mason sitting silently beside him during thunderstorms. Love had not disappeared when Noah left. It had simply stopped being enough on its own. So on the first morning of winter, Noah closed the bookstore for 3 days, packed one small bag, and boarded a train toward the capital. He told no one at the palace he was coming. When he arrived, snow covered the stone steps in white. The guards recognized him immediately, but Noah shook his head when one offered to announce him. He walked through the gates alone. Ethan saw him first. He had been crossing the courtyard with Lucas and Mason when he suddenly stopped. Lucas followed his gaze. Mason went completely still. For several seconds, none of them moved. Months ago, they would have rushed toward him. Now they waited. Noah felt his throat tighten. He crossed half the courtyard before stopping. Snow settled softly on his coat. "You waited," he said. Lucas gave a small smile, fragile around the edges. "We are getting better at it." Ethan looked at Noah, as if afraid hope itself might send him running. "You do not owe us anything." "I know." Mason's voice was quiet. Are you staying? Noah looked toward the palace, then back at them. For 3 days. No disappointment crossed their faces. No pressure. Ethan simply nodded. Then we are grateful for 3 days. Something inside Noah finally softened. He stepped closer, then closer again. The brothers remained still until Noah reached them. I am not promising forever, he said. Lucas swallowed. We are not asking for forever. Ethan added. We are asking for whatever you choose to give. Noah looked at the 3 men who had once assumed his patience was endless. Now they stood before him asking for nothing they had not earned. Slowly, Noah smiled. Then start with dinner. Mason laughed first. Lucas followed. Even Ethan smiled. And together they walked toward the palace. Not as kings reclaiming what they had lost, but as 4 people beginning again. This time, no one walked ahead. This time, no one was left behind.